All right, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order of the Public Works and Sustainability Committee tonight. Tonight is January 9th, 2023. Welcome, everyone. I believe we have two items on our agenda. One is the approval of the minutes from the last meeting held last year. I'll go ahead and move that those minutes be approved without the necessity of a reading. So I'll move that.
I'll second.
That's been moved and second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. That motion passes. There are two members of the committee present. That's myself and Mr. Baker. Mr. Bullock is running a little bit late, but he'll join us here in just about 10 minutes. So that brings us to our big item on the agenda, and I want to thank the Lakewood Tree Advisory and Education Board for putting together this lovely presentation for us. I do believe that when we passed this resolution a few years ago, we required that there be this time, and we built this time into our schedule in the year so we could hear from you. And I really am looking forward to this. So I will leave it at that unless there are other comments or questions from the committee or the administration on this. I'll turn it over to Linda Grandstaff, who's the chair of the board, to take it away and walk us through this presentation. Thank you. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you so much. Oh, wait. Got it. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. We look forward to sharing with you what we've been working on as the Tree Advisory and Education Board. We're going to give you some background and a bit of current state. Then we'll talk through our 2022 accomplishments, our 2023 recommendations, and open it up for any discussion. So tonight, if I can, do I drive the PowerPoint? Thanks. Just hit the button? Okay, great. Thanks. So, and I'll be sharing the floor with other members of the board. So we'd like to really have some dialogue about smart decisions related to our trees and tree canopy. So I'll start with the background and current state. As mentioned, the board was formed in November of 2019. We're charged with collaborating with city officials regarding the urban tree policies, practices, promoting the city's tree programs, and educating residents regarding responsible tree stewardship and the benefits of tree planting on private properties. And that's a really important part of the mission that we need to start ramping up on our private property plantings. Our current members are all with us tonight. The first is, most recently joining us is Mary Brown, then Rita Stevens, Matt Crumbs, and David Sangri. We meet monthly, and we've been meeting with Sam for a long time, and we've met with Tom Evans, and prior to that we had a few meetings with Chris Perry at the very beginning. And we met throughout the pandemic using the GoToMeeting and Zoom process, which really helped. The 19-point tree policy was adopted by the city in 2019. It established the goal to increase our tree canopy in Lakewood to 33% from its current roughly 23% by the year 2035. The forestry department has a current staffing of team leader arborist and 3 additional arborists. That's the operational team that takes care of 13,718 public trees in parks, public property, and on tree lawns. They plant, prune, and remove dead, diseased, and damaged trees. They also picked up the slack and took care of a lot of the tree lawns where we had stumps ground out. In the last year, the contractors that work with us planted 400 trees, removed 19 hazardous trees, removed 109 stumps and the debris from tree lawns, and replanted those tree lawns for the owners. The one thing that we'll come back to is an urban forester position, which was contemplated, and that would focus on tree strategy, community outreach, and initiatives to achieve the canopy goal, And that was approved initially in the 2022 budget, but was reappropriated to engineering, and that still is out there to be discussed. So we'd like to bring that to the table. And I'm going to turn it over now to my colleague Matt Crumbs, who is going to talk about the actions in 2022. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Linda. Good evening, Mayor, Council. Thank you for having us.
And just the down button.
Okay, so Linda went over already what we were charged with as a tree board, and I broke it down into 3 main areas. So collaboration with city officials, promote the city's tree programs, and educate residents. So just to run through these real quick, and if you have any questions, slow me down, fire away, and ask me, dig deeper if you want to, or speed it up. So continue to review and refine the approved species list. So there is a list, and typically, Sam, correct me if I'm wrong, you send that out, or that's available for residents to pick from and say, okay, I want this tree. We've looked at that list, we've made some changes, we've suggested some things come off that list, and then offered some replacements for those. Continue to review planting specs and request appropriate changes. One of those that we've been able to add to the tree planting spec that goes out to the contractor is to have tree guards installed, because we were seeing trees get planted and then bucks come by and they rub on them and they basically destroy them before they even get a chance. So it's nice to see that being added to the spec for the contractor. We also requested, and after trees went in this spring, we saw that there was a really hot, dry spell, of course. As soon as you plant trees, it gets hot and there's no way to water them. And so we suggested and offered our support for a watering truck, and even, if necessary, temporary staffing to keep those trees watered. And then one of the things that I think is really a good example of how the tree board should function, there was a resident that came to a board member and said, hey, I'm concerned about the trees at Lakewood Park Playground. What do you guys think? Can you take a look? So we do have 2 arborists on the tree board. We looked at those, and we did have some concerns. There was certainly something going on there. And I was really pleased when we brought that to Tom Evans' attention. He took that. He immediately made that known that there was something to be concerned about, brought in a contractor. Consulting arborist Bartlett Tree came in. They agreed there were some issues. They did a deep dive, a report and investigation, came up with a remediation plan and a bunch of recommendations, which are being implemented for the most part, most of those, which is great. That, to me, that's the way the tree board, that's one of our ways I think we can be really helpful. And then something we're just starting to get going on, but we're starting to look at the need for tree protection guidelines during either construction and or sidewalk replacement. We've seen firsthand, like on Linda Street, there were sidewalks getting replaced, and you could just see on a drive-by, there's roots sticking up every which way, and we could tell. And it wasn't necessarily the contractor's fault, because they were following what they were required to, but we think there could be more rigorous standards put in place, so we're starting to work on that. Questions on any of that? All right, so second item is promoting the city's tree programs. So we've sent lots of letters of support out. Some of these include supporting grant applications, supporting a budget increase, staffing requests. As Linda mentioned, we've asked that the urban forester position that's been proposed continues to get pushed along and gets filled. We helped create something in partnership with the Lakewood Observer. We called it the Most Distinguished Tree Contest. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that was modeled after the beautiful homes. Okay, so first year of that, we thought we had pretty good participation. There was 25 entries, seemed like it went well. Jim said that was on par, Jim O'Brien, with what they had the first year of the house contest. So we look to continue that this year moving forward. We had board members attend the city's Arbor Day celebration. And then we've been alongside forestry every step of the way, encouraging and supporting that annual tree planting project, spring and summer, checking in with Sam and him, reporting to us. We're on track and where we are in the bidding process and the install process. So that's gone really well for 3 years now that we've been in existence.
I'm going to stop you right there real quick.
Yes, sir.
Really important question. Was a tree most distinguished in that contest?
I think we almost did more of a participation, right? We had multiple winners.
Okay.
We had that number 1.
There was a number 1 tree. I'd love to know what tree it was. But anyway, that's
That's how
okay.
distinguished it was, I can't
Yeah,
remember.
yeah. So you had a lot of great competition.
It was a Dawn Redwood.
Oh, okay.
And
Oh,
I
interesting.
forget which street it was on, but it was on, not a real big street, but it was a beautiful tree.
Olive
All right.
wood or was it one of those?
Yeah.
The little yard, big tree.
I'll follow up
Over there
offline.
by-
and get
Over there
that.
by Hayes.
All right, well, thank you. Continue, please. No.
Number 2 was Sammy the Spruce on Chase Avenue in that, I think that entire block.
Sammy the Spruce on Chase?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll enter that into the record. Thank you. Appreciate that.
And the idea there is just to have some fun with it a little bit, right? Get people looking around the neighborhood, checking stuff out. Whether or not they nominated a tree, at least maybe they'll go look at a tree if they see that it won something. So
I think it's great.
Little things.
Yeah. Well, continue, please.
So, and then lastly, educating residents. So we're trying to participate in some community events. Mary helps put on a great event, the Madison Court Community Coalition event, and we were a part of that with a table in the booth and involved in meeting some residents and some kids. We've written a few articles that have either been on the Tree Board's website or Facebook page. Most recently, we put one up there, why your tree lawn needs a tree. Try to get people, we don't know how many people are seeing these, but just if they are seeing it, you know, and they read it and they think, okay, like, why would I want a tree? Well, maybe we can convince some people that didn't otherwise want one. And then one of the things I really like to do that we've done, there's a resident on Overlook who has a big bur oak tree, and it's considered a Moses Cleveland tree. So it's one of those trees, and it's the last one in Lakewood that was thought to be here in, 1796 when Moses Cleveland came to the shores of Cleveland. So 200 plus years old. It's the last one in Lakewood. There was a program years ago that recognized all these trees, and one by one they're falling off throughout Greater Cleveland. This is the one we've got left in Lakewood. Resident is very concerned, and I would say he's a steward of this tree, but he's a nervous steward. He said he never would have bought his house if he had known that this responsibility was on him.
I know the tree.
We've been there for emotional support for him. We've come and looked at that tree with him. We've met with him. He's reached out to us when the utility company came to do pruning. He was in a panic. We've tried to reassure him what he can and can't do. The tree's in great shape. I haven't been out there since pruning was done, but we've been working with him. His name's Brent Tuma. He's over on Overlook, so that's been really good. That's something I've enjoyed doing as part of the tree board. And then lastly, we supported a tree giveaway. Mr. Ed Dank wanted to give away trees to all third graders in Lakewood last year, and we fully supported that project. Questions?
Excellent. Well, thank you for all that hard
Great.
work. And I want to acknowledge, too, my colleague here, Vice President Keppel, who now sits as your advisor on the board. So thank you for stepping up and doing that, introducing this resolution to get this here today. I served as the first ex officio member, and also Tom, who will be here shortly, who really was the impetus to all of this, making sure that these issues and the last tree plan, what was it called before we made it into a resolution? There was a tree task force.
Task force,
Right, formed a while back, and continuing that, kind of making it a little more formal. I think this is great. I think this is a format we need to look at using with other boards and committees, too, because this is really important information. But before I get too far into it, Mr. Baker, I see you writing away. Do you have some questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it looks like there's another section coming up, but just some preliminary comments. First of all, thank you to all the folks. I mean, you're volunteering your time. Matt is a neighbor, and he got dressed up for us, so we should be very
This is
thankful.
as nice as I get. Yeah, thank you.
And it's interesting, you know, particularly the tree protection guideline for sidewalks and construction. I'm really curious, you know, as the kind of, I think you guys would be a great way to kind of develop best practices and try to educate the city. I know lots of folks that live in Ohio City, you know, they have lots of old trees. You know, anytime you do some sewer work or water line or do some sidewalk replacement, it's a challenge, right? What do you do with the roots? I don't even know best practices. I know some cities, you know, there's like permeable kind of like material you can use in place of sidewalk, but that looks different, right? And that might, to a person who's used to seeing concrete, might object to that. So I think a part of that is education and outreach and kind of educating people that there are other ways to do it so that we're still ADA compliant with our sidewalk, but at the same time, there's a reason why maybe there's a different material here. So really interested in the work you guys can do on that and to help kind of inform, you know, we're going through I think our next round of sidewalk stuff to make sure, so there's probably another batch of ones that are going to be replaced.
I think the challenge with any kind of tree protection guidelines is they They can be real simple or they can be real cumbersome. And if you look online and just Google it, there's one-pagers and then there's 25-pagers. I don't think we want a 25-pager. I think we need it simple. I think we need to be able to enforce it. I don't think we want it to be a burden, but I do think we want to take care of our trees. So we drafted a really short and sweet sample. And I think where we're at with it, we've talked about it internally, and we probably need to, next step, take it to the city engineer and make sure we're getting some buy-in on that end.
Cool, and glad to hear you guys have you advocated for and got the tree protection too, you know, because, Matt, you and I work at an organization that, you know, you learn that you can't just plant something and walk away and, you know, pat yourself on the back. You had to make sure you take care of it, water, have the right protection in place so that it thrives. And I'm glad to see you guys are coming out with those recommendations that are helping.
Good, thank you. All right.
Go ahead and take us through the more recommendations. I think we'll probably have a couple more questions, and then we'll.
And this is David Sangre, not David.
Spell my name.
Welcome, David.
Well, thank you for coming back to the City Council to discuss trees. I was pleased to be here when you guys enacted the commission finally after a number of years. So in 2013, the tree task force was approved after we had had a big decline in trees from Hurricane Sandy and other issues. In 2014, the Tree Task Force issued a series of 19 recommendations for the council that focused on tree planning, tree policies, education, outreach, and tree protection. Many of those policies have been approved by the council and the administration. The council approved this tree canopy goal of 33% by 2035. And we on the tree committee are quite concerned about how we're going to make that goal with our current strategies. So that's what we're going to be talking about a bit more. So I'm going to address 5 major recommendations that we would like, and then Rita, who's going to follow me, is going to get into some additional ideas for the council to consider to try to take the tree efforts into another step. Our first goal is to hire the city urban forester. We believe that the existing forestry department is certainly good and they're trying their best, but they really lack this person who can meet with the residents, can really try to implement a city strategy about forestry, and is more than just an arborist, but actually is the communicator from the city to the residents and the city policies. We think this position is very important, and as Rita's going to talk about, there's a lot of grants available for trees. We think perhaps that position could be helped funded with some grants. We'd like to leverage Lakewood's status as a Tree City USA to build a robust funding portfolio guided by the Tree City USA growth strategy. This is something the Arbor Day Foundation has. We are a Tree City USA, as many of you know, for many years, but they have this growth strategy that we could be doing. Rita's going to talk about that in a few minutes. We'd like to increase the potential to achieve our canopy goal by additional efforts to increase private tree planting. So the city has done a nice job trying to get trees on most tree lawns. But the private trees, my observation is there's a decline. You have homeowners who are they take down an old tree, they don't put up a new tree. And then you have many homeowners, particularly in Clifton Park, they have these large lots, they're just all grass, there's not a single tree there. And they don't understand the goals and the need of the trees for our city. So we would like to, number one, provide a complementary tree for people's backyards. In Rita's former hometown, the community did this, and the program wasn't to provide the planting of the tree, but it provided the tree. And it would be a great promotional effort that we could be doing as a board and as a city to say, here's a 3-gallon tree that is free. We could offer 1 to each resident and maybe set a certain number each year that would be available for free. And then this would create some buzz. You'd have a lot of Lakewood residents who would be like, oh, well, we heard the city has this new program. We could be explaining why we have the program. and it could give a great, it would allow us to do a great promotional effort. We would like to continue the public tree planting program with an increased focus on new tree survival and maintenance. This relates to the summer watering program. Have we hired are we planning to hire a temporary worker for this summer to help implement the watering during the month of July and August? And lastly, we'd like to see a large tree protection ordinance that would require permitting. If somebody has a larger tree in their yard, which we would say is something like 18 inches and larger, that they have to have a permit to take that out, and that there's a requirement for them to replace that tree. Many East Coast and West Coast cities have a tree protection ordinance. We do not have that in Ohio so much, but we could research it further for you. But we feel this would be a very important thing because there are too many homeowners these homes are flipped. The person who buys it's just like, oh, I don't want a tree, and they take it out, and there's just no repercussions for that. Okay, Reed is going to continue with some additional thoughts.
I just have one slide, and my takeaway message is think big, don't do it alone, build on other successes. And I speak from experience in that I served on the equivalent of the tree board in Abington Township, Pennsylvania for 15 years and got to participate in the growth of the board from very much the point where the tree board here is up through 15 years. And so much of what I'm about to say here is based on that positive experience, and one that we did not do it alone. There are a lot of resources out there, a lot of knowledge, and it's a situation where everyone wants to help everyone. It's a very collegial arboriculture industry out there, including the funding. So first, I'd like 2 points. One is I would like to just reiterate a few critical success factors that, to echo what my colleagues on the tree board have illustrated for you and recommended for you, but then speak a little bit about this Tree City USA growth menu, because I think it provides an organization, a way for us to step in and know how to do this. Under the critical success factors, A and B are really connected. The hiring of the city urban forester for the higher level strategic, long-term planning, figuring out, how are we going to get from the 10% increase of canopy. But the reason I say it's connected to B of implementing standard procedures for tree protection, I think we need to recognize that many people make decisions about trees. And when you're in the field there with the chainsaw or the backhoe or whatever, maybe it's engineering, maybe it's public works, there's a lot of people that are working around trees. And I think that having the city urban forester involved and available to help individuals that are not so knowledgeable about trees be there and do the right things, so that we're not cutting down an 80-year-old tree unnecessarily, for instance. The C is the reaching out to key partners and apply for additional grants. I'm a big proponent of having a portfolio. Trees are investment, and I'm really pleased with everything that the City of Lakewood does as far as especially the street tree program. There's a lot more out there that I don't think that the City of Lakewood has really gone after. There's an awful lot at the county level as well as the state level, especially when you talk about trees and water, because they go hand in hand in terms of what trees do in terms of mitigating stormwater runoff and water quality itself in terms of how they clean air, et cetera. So it's not just the tree grants that we need to be looking at. We need to be looking more broadly at environmental grants. And I have personal grant writing history where, just as an example, the board that I served on before, we brought in about $1 million worth of grant money over a 15-year period. And you had to do some degree of match there, but there's a lot of money out there. So I think a lot of it is knowing, like, what do we want to do when, and how do we build our case on that. D is around a call to action for everyone in this room, is that I think every one of you is a leader that has an ability to grow awareness and to make decisions around protecting and growing our tree canopy. And I'll underscore the protect end of things. And we talk a lot about planting, but we have, you know, the, what is it, 23% canopy that's there that needs to be nurtured and grown as well. And by doing so, this heightened awareness and involvement in the entire community is going to be necessary. So just wanted to underscore those. And then finally, just a piece about the Tree City USA growth. To be a Tree City USA, you need to have a tree board. You need to spend $2 per resident on trees, which I know Lakewood goes far and above, and a couple of other things. But it's really like just your foot in the door of Tree City. But if you go after the Growth Award, and I just kind of glanced through what we've done this last year, Lakewood is a shoo-in to have the Growth Award even for 2022. I don't know where the status is of the grant application or the application for getting it is, but you just look through what has been done this last year and we're already there. It has 5 categories, and if you will look, I invite you to look online at this Tree City USA Growth Award reference that I put on the slide here. There's this beautiful menu under each of these 5 categories around how do you build your team, how do you measure and understand, you know, what your canopy is, how does that imply, like how should you be planning your work, what does that imply around best practices on performing, and therefore what policies should you have. And it helps you just start walking. You know, maybe some areas were stronger than others, but it has this menu of activities that you can choose. So in essence, it's like a template for picking your annual plan for what do I really want to be emphasizing this next year. It's also a great template for about a 3-year plan from the grant writing perspective. And I'll close on that in that what I personally found is as my community got involved in the Tree City USA growth end of things, it opened the doors to us to all sorts of funding. So for instance, one in particular, and I haven't been in Ohio long enough, I moved from Pennsylvania 2 years ago about, but in the Pennsylvania equivalent of ODNR is DCNR, and there's all kinds of parks and recreation and environmental type of money out there that you build your case by showing how you're growing as a Tree City USA. So it gives us a really nice methodology, and it goes back to my closing point here is that let's not reinvent the wheel, that there's a lot of success and there's a lot of really smart people out there that have done this and can show us a way. And it's a menu, so we tailor it to what is right for Lakewood. So let's go get that 33% canopy. Thanks.
Well done. Thank you so much. And thank you, Rita, for stepping up to the plate, you know, being a new resident here. And Linda and David and everyone else have been leading the charge for, I mean, a decade now. 2013, 2023, more than a decade. So thank you so much for all that you've given back to Lakewood. And I think our tree canopy thanks you too. I have a couple of questions. I'm sure other members have questions as well. But before that, I want to also welcome and thank the administration for being here, the mayor taking time out of her day, and the law director for being here, and our brand new Public Works Director, Chris Gordon. Thanks for being here, and Mark Papke and Sam. Last name, Sam? I'm sorry. Bavasudo? Okay, welcome, sir. And then who else from the Public Works Department do we have here?
Patrick Costello, I'm in the Division of Forestry.
Patrick Costello, Division of Forestry. Thank you for being here. Because I'll have a couple questions for the administration. We have a little bit of time left here. So thank you for these recommendations. First thing, this urban forester position, I know we budgeted for it in 2022. I'm blanking on if we've budgeted for it for 2023 and kind of what's the administration's thinking on that position currently?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about the history of that position. As was discussed in 2022, we did budget for the urban forester position. We did conduct interviews and we did offer that position to an individual. They unfortunately turned it down. And that's because the way that Public Works is structured today, the person didn't really see an incentive with his background to come here. So we've been spending some time to look at, actually within the 2023 budget, we have really a study to look at all of our departments, but especially Public Works, to look at how it's organized and where we can potentially make improvements. So that's kind of where that urban forester position is today, is that we're kind of looking at where we would position that within the Division of Streets and Forestry. We do have, all of our foresters are arborists, so we are looking at potentially seeing if any of our current arborists are interested in pursuing some additional education to take on those additional responsibilities and that role. But keep in mind that the division manager of streets and forestry is really, at the end of the day, at least how it's structured today, responsible for the overall goals and visions and plan for both streets and forestry. So that's a long way of saying that we're looking at it and we're trying to figure out the right way to bring in some additional skill set, maybe some additional planning in terms of urban forestry.
Do you think, is there a timeline? Is there a sense of timeline on that? Is it kind of touch and go? What's the
Well,
thought?
we've had some transition. As we mentioned, Tom Evans, who is the Streets and Forestry Division Manager, did recently retire. So we do have an open position. So I think it's important to get that person on board. But in the meantime, with Chris on board, with Patrick's expertise and Sam, we're kind of looking at the way things operate. And again, looking at our current staff to see if anyone's interested in taking on some additional responsibilities and really becoming that city urban forester.
Thank you. And yes, that seems to be, I think we all agree, that's a very important thing, and I'm super happy to hear that that's coming along. Before I get too far, I'll open it to my colleagues. Anyone else here in the committee or on council have any thoughts or questions at this present moment? Mr. Baker, or sorry. Oh, Mr. Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to everyone who presented tonight. This is all great information. And what I'm interested in, particularly, I think Mr. Sangri brought it up, was the tree protection ordinance. And I've heard of these, and I do understand that they're typical on the coasts. But I'm curious if in any of your research you found in Ohio that any municipality does it, or have you not dug into that yet? I guess if he's allowed to comment.
When we looked into this a few years ago, we did not find anyone in Ohio that had it, but we did find multiple examples in states on the eastern shore. That I think Pennsylvania, we found a few, and New Jersey particularly, so, but not Ohio.
And so the general thrust of it is that a permit will be required at a certain DBH, and then if you take it down, there's either a replacement or a fee associated with it?
Yes,
Okay.
it's not to say, it's not to eliminate the ability, it's just to say they have to get permission, and if they do it, that it's not needed, then there would be some penalty to try to encourage them not to do it. So that would be the goal.
Great, thank you.
Mayor?
Yeah, just to chime in on that, when I was on council, that kind of issue arose. So I did some digging into it when I was on council because it sounded like a really good idea that we don't want people just taking down historic trees because of the effect on the neighborhood, the environment. However, what I came across with the law department was the issue of the liability and the scenario of we have a tree that is dangerous and we're waiting for a permit to be approved. And in the meantime, we have this dangerous tree, you know, it could fall over a limb and God forbid something would happen to someone. I wouldn't want that on my conscience as we're waiting for the bureaucratic process. But I would be really interested to see if there's some sort of go-between or midway point that we could reach, because I do agree with the overall premise that we don't want people taking down trees just because they don't want to deal with it, they don't like the look. So maybe we can find an area that makes sense for Lakewood.
I think certainly some kind of full legal review by the city to figure out what we can do in Ohio. Every state's a little bit different, right? And what we're allowed to do, and where liability falls or doesn't fall. For instance, I think the state exempts certain entities from liability, but not others, depending on it, when it comes to trees and how they fall, where they fall. Yeah.
And just to reiterate, the liability is something, but for me at least personally, I was more worried about the what-if scenario. I think we could, I'm not speaking for the law department, I think we could probably maybe deal with the liability, but I don't know if I could consciously live with knowing that a tree was dangerous and then something happened to somebody. So that's where I at least fall on that.
Yeah. All that said, I think it's important. I think we could certainly do that review. And you're right. Yeah, I think we looked at it around the same time. We've talked about this when I was on the board back in the very early days about how we do some ordinance to protect trees and give some guidance about when and how to remove trees along with that. It'll be a large part of education too, so your role becomes greater and greater. All these recommendations, I think, have added responsibilities to your board, especially in the tree planting and removal side of things. So I think it's a good thing, and thank you for stepping up. And Mr. Baker, it sounds like you want to.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mayor, and that's really good information. And I think that there probably are ways that, I'd be interested in working with the administration, at least to study a little more that, just like in building and housing permits, there could be a dangerous condition at a house, and, the requirement is to fix the dangerous condition, permit be damned, right, for public health and safety. So I think there are maybe ways we can get creative to look at. I'm at least committed to looking into it and working with the group because, and I think it's, what's the size, what's the fee, is the money earmarked? So there's lots of different questions I think we'd have to dig into, but, every time I go down a street and I see a, 30, 40-inch DBH tree get cut down and like a little part of me dies. And sometimes they need to, right? That's the useful life of a tree. Sometimes there are issues. But it would be good if we maybe formalize the process a little more, because I think that part of the growth strategy, right, the 33%, it's maintaining and protecting what we currently have as well as growing, the base. So I think that's a really good kind of ball that's in our court on council that we can move the ball forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Mr. Bullock? Sure. Ms. Copeland?
Thank you. Thanks all for being here. It's always a pleasure working with you these last, since I've been on. I just wanted to clarify for anyone who may not be familiar, when we say 33%, what 33% of what? 33% of land has trees on it? What is that correct?
I'll just speak to it as.
Yeah,
Please.
through the chair.
Pretend you're a bird, that you're flying over Lakewood and the trees are fully leafed out. 33% of what you look down on land is green tree, and the rest is not tree.
So when we're, yeah, so so when we say that we're talking about canopy, not necessarily the number of trees, correct?
Correct, it's a canopy. It's like a percent of area of the land that would be covered if you're looking down.
Right. And I think that goes to the protection part, and because we can keep planting, saplings every year, and we're never going to get there because they're just not going to give us that canopy, right? So, so I really appreciate. I know how hard you all have been working, and it's wonderful to have your expertise on this board. So thank you for your service on that. And in terms of the urban forester, I know, Mayor George, you and I had talked about this some, but with our upcoming climate, or with our climate action plan, I think this isn't a question, it's just a comment that I think that this could be a good confluence of events to figure out where that urban forester position could, and to the point of the candidate who didn't take it, there's a natural sort of tension between streets and forestry, right, when we're talking about the root systems, having those guidelines for, how we manage those things. So maybe looking at, with that climate action plan, is there someone charged with overview of not just maybe the tree canopy, but making sure of our climate policies are enacted throughout the city. So that might just be an opportunity to be looking at that from a broader perspective. So just putting that out there.
Good, interesting thought. I did have one thought along the lines of, so there's two basic existential crises, I think. One of them is climate specifically, right? And those are the things that cities have to deal with because we have to deal with the larger wet weather events that happen. Also biodiversity, right? Making sure that we have the right numbers of native plants and animals and things to sustain life for us humans for the long haul. And I think trees are an important part of that, and making sure we have the diverse tree coverage here. And that's something I think the city's worked hard on for a lot of years, but I'd love to know, either from the board or the city, I'll start with the board, how are we doing tree diversity-wise? How is that going to play into this plan to increase the tree canopy? And, you know, so where are we and where are we going in terms of biodiversity? Thank you.
So I have opinions on that. I'm an arborist, and I think it's important when we talk about urban forestry and urban trees, native trees are good, but trees that live are best. And so there's a lot of great trees out there, and we don't want to exclude a non-native tree because we just want natives. Because what we really want to make sure is we got trees that are going to thrive in tough conditions, in tree lawns, with pollution, with road salt. So I think we got a pretty good list. We've gone over this list multiple times. We've gone back and forth with Sam. There's been lots of instances where we actually recommended a tree that people really liked, Crimson King Norway maple. It's that big red maple that everybody remembers when they were a kid. It's a terrible tree. Looks great, people love it, doesn't live long, it falls apart, and it's actually invasive. It spreads to helicopters, and those sprout up as green-leafed maples, and they're very aggressive, invasive trees. So I think our list is good. It's a pretty long list. We give people a lot of options, and I think as long as we continue to assess it and review it and refine it, I think we're doing pretty good.
What do we use to keep track? And is that system, I know there was some talk a few years ago about what system we use and if it's adequate, and is there a transition in our future to a new tree cataloging system? And that may be an administration question, I'm not sure.
I think you guys can tackle it too, but I think we hit this pretty hard and heavy a couple years ago. It was Tree Keeper by Davey. It was a great program. The problem is it takes a lot of work to keep up with it, and I know there was some, some period of time where everything wasn't, because a tree comes out, you got to update the database. Tree goes in, you got to update the database. It takes somebody, that urban forester position perhaps, somebody really focused on that. I think right now it needs an update, like a massive update. And I know Davey Resource Group, who provides that service, they offer for a price, of course, to come in and give you a reboot and get that thing back up to snuff. But I don't think it's going to be cheap, if I had to guess. I don't know if you guys have any more background on that.
So to speak in regards to that, we're going to be integrating Tree Keeper in our Lakewood GIS system. Credit to Josh Conrad in the engineering department with the GIS. Couple different bullet points with it. Easily field locate proposed planting locations, quickly locate existing planted locations, improves our methods of updating data internally via the desktop, because it'll all be tied together. Expedites any modifications to the system by keeping it in-house. So he handles all of our GIS. So again, Tree Keeper and GIS would be tied together, so he would be in-house. And the ability to look at properties on a partial basis to determine which property owners have opted out of planting while we're there. Also, can include reporting and mailing functionality. I mean, there's a lot of things we could run with it. And we're already paying for GIS subscription, so it would just be tying it right in.
Seems to make sense. Ms. Kepler.
Thanks. If I could follow up on that, Dr. Gordon, does that also show us where the stumps are? Because I know this year we struggled to get, we struggled to get someone to remove stumps, and then I know that's been a big thing, so that also includes our stumps?
Yes, it can.
Okay. And, Mr. Chair, if I'm...
Oh, please.
Where are we with, I know this year was a big stump removal project. How are we doing on stumps? We have more that we need to tackle in the next few years? Yes, Linda's nodding.
The plan is to continue to do about the same amount.
Each year? Is that, or next year?
At least for this year.
Okay, all right, thank you. Yeah, I know that was a challenge to get that done, so thank you.
Since we have a few more minutes here, kind of moving on down the list, the Tree City USA growth strategy, is that something the city currently is involved with? Are there Are there adjustments? Is this something we need to start? I know we've been a Tree City USA, I think since the very beginning, right? I think we were one of the first cities in Ohio to do it, and we're proud of it. Yeah, where are we at with that? Is there something we could be doing to kind of embrace it more fully?
Just waiting to hear back.
Okay, on grant applications? Is that what this, or the?
Not at the grant, just on the 46th.
Okay. So I'll have to learn more. I think maybe, Rita, looks like you have some thoughts here, but I think I need to learn more about what the strategy is to kind of have a more formulated thought and set of questions around it, but please.
You apply for the growth award at the same time you apply for your renewed status. So I would imagine that's already locked and loaded for this past year. So what I would recommend, and in fact, the tree board has put on a near-term agenda, is to look at this menu and to offer, from our perspective, some recommendations on how we might want to get started in areas so that we could cover a nice area, all 5 of those areas. And it's actually a pretty robust system for planning as well as reporting back. And so we're hopeful to be able to provide some guidance in the first quarter of this year of where we might want to focus our areas and also take credit for what we're already doing so that we could be ready to apply for 2023.
Excellent.
Sound good? Anything else?
Very good.
And just so everybody knows, we did receive a grant from ODNR as well.
Oh, excellent. What was that for? What was the grant relating to?
$25,000.
Okay, for tree planting? There's usually a $50,000 grant we apply for every year from the county as well, I believe, and you've been very successful in acquiring those the last few years running, I think, which is helpful, so thank you for that. Sorry, Ms. Keppel.
I just wondered, did we get this is probably for the administration, I don't know who. Do we have a plan then for the summer watering program, or how are we tackling that?
Yeah, so currently, sorry, I had it all in my PowerPoint here. Let me flip my sheets back. We did have a water tank for the city vehicle for watering this year, which we did. And we are also utilizing summer part-time staff, which is the plan again for this year, to water the trees. So therefore, we're not dedicating a full-time employee to just watering trees on a day-to-day basis. We would utilize the summer part-time help.
This is, to the chairs, I think the point was made that I think most of us are concerned about trees for all the great things that they do for us, but they are also a huge investment for the city, so we want to make sure we're taking care of them. So thank you very much for all the work.
And in line with that, we're also adding Gator Bags for each tree planted. That was added to the contract.
Great.
So we have the Gator Bags, the watering truck, and then part-time help to do the watering.
Awesome. Thank you.
So I love this idea of the complimentary tree, 3-gallon tree. Is that something that has been is this a new idea, I guess is the question?
That's a
Okay.
new idea. I did want to come back to
Please.
the watering issue, because the last couple of grants we received are focused on plantings in equity zones, which is great, super. But those are higher rental areas, and relying on residents to water their new tree on their tree lawn is going to be a challenge. And that's why the watering tanks, the water gators are really critical.
Excellent. That makes a lot of sense.
Thank you.
So I think some of these new ideas we'll have to mull over. I think we're running out of time. I want to make sure we get to all of our questions. But I love the idea of some kind of program to help folks. And I think, again, your role in educating folks, and those, just like with the private tree planting for the front yards, would be pivotal in any kind of success. But I'm sure that's a conversation we can begin on our end and see about, and this is a ongoing, long-term thing, right? But we know we need to take some aggressive action. That 33 number is large. But it's necessary if we're going to accomplish what we need to accomplish here. At that, Mr. Bullock, did you have any thoughts?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, members of the Tree Education Advisory Board. And David knows I worked with the previous version of the board dating back 10 years. And it is for good reasons, because, 2009, 10, 11 timeframe was when we got a renewed focus. Here it is 10 years or more later, And there are some trees that are still pretty small in their lifetime that got planted back then that we need to care for now. So thanks for the citizen expertise, continued focus. Thank you to the mayor and the administration for being here and so engaging and focused with the public on it. I do think trees are good. People love them. You know, it turns out it's a complicated subject because trees are different, and there's some of the public right-of-way, some of the private right-of-way. So I got a couple of thoughts and comments here. Probably won't have time to get into all of this, but I do recall at one point we had root block. Along with Gator Bags and other watering techniques, we had attempts to experiment with preventing the roots from causing cement problems, which then prompt human beings to cause tree removals. So those take a while to test. I seem to recall that a while back, at least a handful of trees were planted with that on tree lawns. I'm wondering if that's an experimental technique that we're still investigating and evaluating. I'd love to hear how that's going or not. I also seem to recall just avoiding certain tree species is also pretty effective. So I'm gonna, should I pause, or do you want to? I could run down the list too. Go ahead.
I believe that was before my time, so back, I think Chris may have done that.
For sure, you did, yeah.
Chris,
Do we have any records of that? Okay, we don't.
that I know of.
Okay, well, maybe we could poke around and find.
Yeah, we could look into it.
Okay, that'd be wonderful. And another, I think, best practice we were doing, and this is prompted because I see in the tree board's recommendation or accomplishment slide, was talking about sidewalk construction replacement standards to make sure that we're continuing our good work to take good walkable sidewalks out of conflict with a nice tree canopy, because then you can walk in the shade, which is lovely, right? So I must confess I haven't been following up year by year by year to double check what we're doing or ask what new trick we're doing. There's a street excavation version of the same thing where when, for example, on Gladys, we're digging a trench all the way down the full length of the street, not down the center line because the water pipes are towards one end. It used to be they'd take a big saw and cut every root and then tell the residents, well, these trees are hazardous because the roots are all been cut, so they're all got to come down. And then for a while, we were taking a better approach, which was, at least for some of the trees, we were taking a pneumatic air tool to excavate and go underneath, and that was a little bit more work, but you could save a good number of those trees, and that contributes to the character of the street, not to mention all the other tree benefits that we're talking about. So I haven't heard and I haven't asked for quite some time if we're still doing that practice. I hope we are, obviously.
Yeah, yes, we are.
Great.
On the water main streets and even resurfacing streets, we're meeting with our certified arborists on staff. We do that a year before the project goes out, and we're evaluating that, making sure we have the right notes in our plan sets, and making sure that that happens.
So that's been successful in your, kind of construction?
Yes, it has.
Experience,
But, we have areas that, a water box or all their connections are right underneath the tree. There's really nothing you can do at that point. But I can tell you that every tree that we do remove due to these projects, we're replanting one right away.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And not every tree is going to be saved, but of course, it depends what you're removing versus replacing, because if it's a small sapling, then we've lost decades potentially of time and money the city taxpayers have invested in that old tree, replacing it at more expense with a new small tree. So the optimal thing, of course, would be to save as many as possible. So that's really great news to hear that that's been continuing and seems to be working pretty successfully. I'd love maybe at another time to find, is it half the trees get saved, or a third, or 10%, or 80%, or what? But it'd be great to know that.
Mr. Bullock?
Yep.
There's one thing that I did not do, and I apologize. Despite our clerk's best efforts to inform me earlier today, I misunderstood. And I guess there is another presentation from the administration side. And if you have the ability, I don't know if you have the keyboard in front of you there, But, you know, if you'd like to, oh, Mr. Clerk is going to go through this. If you want to take the next 5 minutes to walk us through this. Again, my apologies to administration for missing that cue, but we'd love to hear from you at this time.
Mr. Chair, if I can just, as a concluding teaser, I would like to join you and other colleagues on the private tree conversation, because David Sangri, among others, has been consistent for years about saying, you know, the city's got to start figuring out a tool set, and I appreciate the mayor's interest too, whether that's a legal requirement or some other tool. I think there probably are a bunch of ways we could approach it, but count me in as a supporter. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Go ahead.
All right, first of all, nice to meet everybody. Again, I'm Chris Gordon, the Public Works Director for the City of Lakewood. I'm very grateful and thankful for this opportunity, so it's great to meet everybody. I'm joined here by Sam Bonvusoto, I always butcher his name, the Acting Streets and Forestry Supervisor, Patrick Costello, the Group Leader for Forestry, and everybody knows Mark, because it's Mark. So we're just going to go through this. I'll try to make this as quick as possible. In 2002, the forestry accomplishments, 408 new trees planted, including 6 4-inch calipers. Trees at Lakewood and Madison Parks, we knew about the concerns there and how sensitive that subject was. 109 stumps were removed and 94 trees were removed. Those included hazardous, dead, dying, storm, and hit by vehicle. In 2023, we have $280,000 allocated for contractual services. The plan is to plant 350 to 400 new trees, of course, again, based on the bids received. I think we all know the sign of the times nowadays. We have absolutely no idea where the numbers are going to be. We have what we think is a relatively good number, but that could change. 125 stumps plan to be removed, remove hazardous trees as needed, and again, the continued management of the citywide tree inventory. As I said before, new for 2023, the Gator Bags for each tree planted are being added to the contract. The water tank for city vehicles for watering, and then again, utilizing summer part-time staff to water the trees. That's so then we're not dedicating one full-time employee for just watering. We want to campaign for residents to water trees and use Gator Bags, including social media posts for watering trees. We all know how popular social media is nowadays, so we're certainly going to run right to that. As the mayor said, here's a list of our forestry staff. The plan for 2023 is to add an urban forester position. And again, as the mayor said, we do have somebody on staff who has shown great interest in the position, which I think would be, in my opinion, an excellent move. If you know the urban forester position would be to be filled. I think somebody internally that's got some experience with the trees here in Lakewood would be a great move. As I said before, the tree inventory plan is to integrate the tree keeper into the Lakewood GIS system. And again, these are just some bullet points that we wanted to hit on: grant applications, budgeting. One of the big ones we wanted to hit on, as we all said before, the amount of trees that are here in Lakewood is plant only what the city can manage, and not really just planting to plant. But understanding, as the board said, that it takes a lot of work, and again, we only want to plant what the city can manage. So again, was that quick enough for you?
Great work. Wow, you really jumped into it here, so thank you for that. Does the board have this presentation, the tree board? Okay, we'll make that available to you as well, so you can mull it over. And Mr. Baker, make it quick.
Okay, thank you for the presentation, and one thing I always plug, there's a lot of limited access highway by 90 that's just grass, that I'm sure Public Works cuts all the time. We should plant trees there. And if it takes coordination with ODOT, I'd be happy to help coordinate with ODOT. I work with ODOT. Sometimes it's hard to get them moving, but if you know the right things to say, you can do it. I just see lots of opportunities to plant trees there, which would reduce traffic noise, create more tree canopy, do everything we want to do. So thanks.
So for the head of the next committee is running a little bit late, so we have a little bit extra time. Thank you, Vice President Keppel. So yeah, go ahead, Mr. Bullock.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Another question on my laundry list. We, for a while, were doing front lawn tree planting of the public tree program. but on those streets where the tree lawn's too narrow or some other condition. And so is that practice is still continuing? It sounds like it may be.
Yes, that practice is still going on. In the fall, we couldn't plant anything because of the equity zones. In the spring, we will be hitting, I think, 4 or 5, maybe 6 streets again. So,
Okay. Is it successful, you think, like reasonably widely participated in? Or could we, do we need to?
I'm hoping more this year.
Okay.
Yes.
The reason that comes to mind is because of the discussion of the tree canopy goal, trying to push it well above 30%. As I recall, having too few sites to plant is one of the limiting factors. So what Councilman Baker just suggested is a way to get more area. And then the proposal to plant in, or to have free or discounted perhaps backyard tree planting, is another interesting one. Maybe this might even be more complex, but backyard tree care for mature trees that are in the backyard, that instead of them, getting a tree disease or having a tree disease left untreated, or, having a dangerous limb and things spiraling out of control, then you'd help not just plant new trees, but retain the larger ones. Now, that probably is more expensive, more involved, but maybe if we did pursue grants, maybe there could at least be, in a certain year, we have a certain amount of resources available to the community. You portion out by neighborhood and then say first come, first serve within the neighborhood or whatever criteria is, but it might be worth attempting, given the fact that, we've got more private planting sites than public. Just some brainstorms, but I do think, from what I can tell from my colleagues and from the administration, everybody's interested in trying to keep advancing this, and I welcome it myself. Thanks.
Great. Any other thoughts from members? Yes, Ms. Keppel.
Thank you. I just wanted to say how much I've enjoyed this discussion, and I really appreciate, again, the tree board, but also the administration and public works team and Engineer Papke, and just everyone being really collaborative, and it gives me a lot of hope for our tree canopy, and let's keep working on it. So just appreciate the opportunity, and thanks, everyone.
It's a big goal, but thank you for keeping us focused. Ms. Grandstaff, did you have any? Okay, I saw you raise your hand. No, all right. Administration, Mayor, anyone else? Any further thoughts since we have a minute?
No, I'd just like to thank everyone, thank the city staff, Sam, Patrick, the whole forestry crew for all you do every day, the board for all you do, your recommendations. Was really glad last fall when you brought to us the Gator Bags and the water tank that we were able to implement some of those things for the upcoming year. So looking forward to the continued dialogue and collaboration. I think collectively we've really working to improve our tree canopy so we can get to that 33% goal here.
Yeah, thanks again for keeping us focused. All right, well, there being no further business before the Sustainability and Public Works Committee, we'll call this meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for your time.